this extreme group of MAGA crowd, it's kind of like they act like there'll be no effect on our economy or on the Commonwealth. And let me say, there's no state on a per capita basis that is harder hit during a shutdown than Virginia. We've got north of 170,000 federal employees. We literally have hundreds of thousands of folks who work in the Pentagon and military installations around our state. We have thousands and tens of thousands of contractors. And even though they may be ultimately paid when a shutdown is over, in the interim, they don't get paid. And you can't punt on your mortgage. You can't punt on, if you work remotely, on your ability to get remote internet access. The list goes on. And again, we have seen this take place when we went through the longest shutdown in government history under President Trump. I just don't get anyone who's calculating that somehow this is in the country's best interest or even their short-term political interest. We've seen the American public follows this close enough to figure out who's to blame, and the blame lies solely at this point with, unfortunately, a small group of House Republicans. We know in Virginia that will have enormous effect to our service members, to the folks who work in the defense area. If Virginia's going to be the hardest hit, Hampton Roads will be the hardest part of Virginia hit. And that's not good for anyone. But it affects a whole host of Americans who don't work for the federal government. I mean, we've been working relentlessly to try to get rid of the passport backlog for Virginians who want to get passports. That will come to a grinding halt. NIH research will come to a grinding halt during the midst of a shutdown. Air traffic control, we've already seen record delays at our airports. Well, if air traffic controllers were being forced to work and not getting paid during the shutdown, you've seen in the past where people, they or TSA might start calling in sick. This is I've used the phrase before, stupidity on steroids, but that seems to be where the crowd that's driving the House is driving us straight towards the cliff. I've got legislation in the past that's called the Stop Stupidity Act that's not very popular with my staff, but I still think it's pretty popular with Virginians that would say, if there's a government shutdown, the only people who don't get paid are Congress and the White House, because ultimately they are the decision makers about whether we get ourselves into this position.
You shouldn't shut down the government of the most important nation on earth, and you shouldn't threaten a shutdown, which makes everybody nervous. It makes federal employees nervous. Will they be able to work or not? Will they get a paycheck on time or not? It makes people nervous who are interacting with the IRS about maybe getting a tax refund. Will their phone calls be answered, or will they have to delay? Veterans who are waiting to get a veterans benefit application approved. Will I have to wait? I've waited long enough. Do I have to wait even more? Every day, our office gets calls from people, Americans abroad, their passport got stolen. I need a passport to get home. Well, if there's nobody there to answer the phone and help you, how are you going to get home? October is a particularly bad time for a government shutdown for some. We have a lot of communities in Virginia around national parks, like the Shenandoah National Park. And if you're in a tourism business, a hotel, a restaurant, maybe an outdoor store, this time in the fall is probably one of your two busiest seasons of the year. And we saw what happened when there was a shutdown in October of 2013. Our communities like Chincoteague, next to the National Park and Wildlife Refuge, or communities in the Shenandoah Valley near Shenandoah National Park, they got hit really hard. And if you missed the busy season, it's not like everybody's going to say, great, I'll come in the middle of November when the leaves are all gone. People say, well, maybe I'll come next year, or maybe I'll go somewhere else next year. So everybody gets hurt in this way. Everybody gets hurt.
Let's assume you're not a federal employee or even a government contractor. It would mean if you travel, you're going to get longer lines at the airport because TSA and the government and the air traffic controllers will be at some level of reduced service. If you're waiting on a passport because you had that long anticipated trip you wanted to take, try to cancel the trip because Lord knows when you'll ever get that passport. If you want to, as we think about approaching the fall foliage season, particularly in areas like the Shenandoah Valley, if our national parks restrict access or cut back on services, it hits the economy of the Shenandoah Valley who oftentimes peak foliage is peak tourism season. If you are concerned about health research, that research at NIH comes to a grinding halt. The litany goes on and on and on. Beyond the fact that if you're an average Virginian or average American, it's just embarrassing. How can the greatest country in the world, the most powerful economy in the world, be once again in this dysfunction mode? And this time, in the past, there may have been real battles between the parties. This isn't even a battle between the parties. This is a battle between an extremist group of folks that can't even agree what they want and everyone else. So I'm still optimistic, but the clock is ticking, and it feels like the House is spending more time, amongst the Republican conference at least, with a circular firing squad than actually thinking about how we keep the government operating. And I would point out, just so that for the non-budget nerds in the group, we're talking about the continuing resolution, which is the best chance we have right now. But even in a continuing resolution, that will have harm, particularly on the DOD side, because it means you have to continue spending based upon the previous fiscal year, which it ends this September 30th. So if if a ship repair is finished, you can't start the next ship repair because that money may be in the account from last year, not this coming year. So even the CR does not get us over some of the problems that will affect, again, in Hampton Roads and our military. But I do think, we're not going to, the vast majority of folks in both parties are not going to watch idly while a small group of extremists try to take down our government or try to cut off our commitment to our allies. People should have good-spirited debates, but the kind of nihilist approach of let's just burn the house down, I sure as heck hope that voters, regardless of the party, if this comes to pass, will remember who lit the match.